The concept of being saved by faith has always ran through Scripture. As a matter of fact, Abraham was an uncircumcised Gentile when he received that covenant. And you can take it all the way back to Genesis chapter 3 when the promise is given to Eve that her seed will bruise the head of the serpent. That's faith. They were anticipating salvation through the work of the Father. The problem we have is when we get into the law, or speaking primarily the Levitical structure, we think that's of works when Scripture never teaches that. As a matter of fact, if you go to Hebrews chapter 4, he tells us that in verse 2 that the gospel was preached to us and to them, they at Mount Sinai, but the difference is they did not mix it with faith, so it never profited them. And so when you come to these passages in the New Testament where it's arguing the law being works, and all the arguments that Paul has and even Jesus has, it's they are challenging the Pharisees who have false doctrine. They are the ones who are butchering the Scriptures. And you got to understand that, or at least observe that in Scripture, because salvation has always been through faith. That's why Abraham is an uncircumcised Gentile when he receives the promise. Look at Job, the concept of Job, chapter 1. It's all over Scripture of people being saved by faith. One thing to note when you kind of read how the law was actually instituted, it kind of came in three tiers. You had the Ten Commandments, which was in the Ark of the Covenant, which is what I believe we're in covenant with, the moral concept of the kingdom, establishing it in this world. And then you have the law of the land, which doesn't necessarily apply to us. We can get a lot of value of it because you do see the heart of the Father in a lot of those laws. But we're not in the land, and so they really don't apply to us. It was God sanctifying his people as a nation with land laws. And then you have the Levitical system, which really is the shadow that Christ is the substance of. And that's very applicable. It's been the Levitical portion of it has been done away with, or should I say the Aaronic portion has been done away with. Christ fulfilled that, and it'll never return. It doesn't need to, because Christ has now accomplished it, and he is, in heaven at the real temple, where we will then ascend to when we're resurrected. So when you understand that, you start to realize, what laws are they speaking of in the book of Galatians and Thessalonians and Corinthians that Paul's always going against, and is typically the doctrines and traditions of man. Hand washing and circumcision would be the two major culprits that I observe in Scripture.